What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Katherine Reay. We are talking about her book, The Berlin Letters. That book is available now. I always really enjoy talking to authors when their work is a historical fiction novel because and it's really cool to learn about all their fascinating research, things that maybe that they were surprised to learn or that they found the most fascinating, and just how they integrate history, real historical events into a fictional story. That's just I just think it's really cool and really fun to hear about how they did that. But either way, I'll let you guys get to it. Here is Catherine.
So today we've got Katherine Reay here. We are talking about the Berlin Letters. That book is available now. Katherine, thanks so much for joining me. Grown, I've learned that I have a soft spot for historical fiction. So
Oh,
I was
great.
really delighted. Yeah, I was really delighted for the opportunity to read this. And I really liked kind of her Louise's character, like what you did with her, and the whole plot, the whole idea was like super cool, and it was really engaging. So I'm excited to dig a little bit deeper today.
Yeah. Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
So before we get started, can you give like a little summary? We'll try to be spoiler free, but like a little summary of the book so that listeners can follow along with the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, Louisa, who you mentioned, the main character, she is a CIA code breaker, and she's part of a fictional group that I did base on a real CIA code breaking project called the Venona Project. And it is the first week of November, 1989. And something at work triggers a childhood memory, and she finds a cache of letters and realizes that the father she has long presumed dead is actually alive and languishing in a Stasi prison in East Berlin. So she does what we would all do. She hops on a plane with no plan at all, determined to get him out, to free him. And she goes to East Berlin on the night of November 9th, 1989. And if you know your history, that is the night the Berlin Wall falls. So it was just a lot of fun taking her character through there. And she will lead us, as I said, through 1 week of 1989. But that long presumed dead father who is alive will lead readers from the day the wall goes up in 1961 to the night the wall falls in 89. And his name is Harris. And so he has a few chapters that allow us to glimpse at life behind the Berlin Wall during that time. So that's a little bit about it. Not too many spoilers. There's a lot in there that I bet everybody knows the ending. The wall does fall.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's like the cool thing about historical fiction. It's like it's easy to not give away so much, even though the reader at the end, like, they know what happens, right? And
Right.
it's just exploring one character's role or part or their experience, what one person might have experienced, and that little, even if it's like a super niche like part of the region or that community, it's cool to imagine what this one person or what role they would have played.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really like what you did with Louise's character, like I said, because she excels at what she does, and she's wondering like, why am I being overlooked, kind of thing. And then that was one of the cool things I like, because she's a smart person, she's crafty and intelligent. um and then it's once the reader progresses through the story, we realize, oh, there's a reason why she wasn't being overlooked. They were looking at her. That was the point. So they had to be
Right.
more careful. Yeah.
But that's one specific thing. But if you think about it, even when we progress through our own lives, there are these influences that we may never know about that absolutely play a role in our story. And yes, this was on the page, but it is an interesting idea because you're right. She was smart and she was getting the job done.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, I was feeling for her too. I was like, yeah, what gives? I was like, Lisa, girl, you're being cheated a little bit. And then once we progress through the story, we're, oh, okay, girl. Readers, oh, that's tricky. That's smart. That sucks for her. She doesn't, because she has
But
very
there's a
little
much
information.
bigger.
Yeah, like she has no idea what's going on. She's been led to believe a certain thing, and then she realizes she hasn't been clued in on like nearly the half of it. And when
Yeah.
she does, and she turns proactive, like she's okay, no, absolutely not, we're gonna go do this, we're gonna go do something right now. And that was, yeah, it was admirable. I think that's partially why I liked her too, because she was just like, absolutely not, like we're gonna, like, you could tell the trepidation too. She's like, she knows that she has to, but there's that fear, you know, that she got to go do something. And no, even her aunt is, yeah, like, good luck. Like, she almost like she was expecting it, like, Godspeed.
I know.
If I was, yeah, I don't know. If I was Louisa, I'd be like, wait, what the heck? Am I the last? Am I truly that blind? Am I the last to know of everybody?
So
Yeah.
many secrets in that family. So many
Yeah.
secrets.
I know that's one
Oh.
way to put it. So, can we go into your background a little bit? Because I was looking at your website and stuff, and you got like a good amount of published works out in the world. So, I want to like dig into your experiences and like maybe how any of your previous releases was there anything different, and what led you to tell the Berlin Letters, and then like maybe your experiences, was it the same or different as your previous works, stuff like that.
So my first 7 books are contemporary fiction, people working out light and life today. And then when I was writing a book called The Printed Letter Bookshop, and on the surface, that book is, that published in 2019. And on the surface, that book is a super fun story about 3 women coming together in an independent bookstore and maybe saving the store and maybe becoming friends while they do it. But what I discovered when writing that book is the real theme of that story is that those 3 women, none of them is living her best life because her best present. And that's because either she misunderstands her past and she's living in the past, or she's living in the future someday when she thinks she'll be happy. But nobody's living in the here and now. And that led me to this idea that our past leaves this indelible mark upon us, collectively and individually, even if we don't know what that past is. And I wrote next The London House, which is my first historical fiction, because I wanted to bring that past out of backstory. I wanted it to be on the page where the contemporary heroine encountered it at the same moment the reader did. And then, to be honest, I fell so in love with the idea of bringing the past to life that the next was A Shadow in Moscow, and that led me to the Berlin Letters. So it absolutely has been an evolution in writing, and I've had so much fun with it. Sort of short
Yeah,
story.
yeah, I imagine I do want to like tap into the research part of it because I imagine, you had fun with that and you probably had to do a different approach anyway from what you're used to with the contemporary versus historical versions of this. Yeah, I want to like explore like your research process and maybe like the more fascinating things learned.
Okay, so many fascinating things learned. But in order to place, say, in the book, Oma and Opa, who lived in Germany, and even Aunt Alice, I needed to do a deep dive into that world. And I read everything I could find before I ever wrote a word on Germany and Berlin, even reading the whole like history, 750-year history of Berlin. So read a ton, watched a lot of movies, and once I felt I could understand their world and put them in it, then I started to write the book. And then the research never ended. There was constantly, I knew where I needed sort of beats of an event. And there were so many events that happened during the Cold War, to be honest. You could just, there were so many skirmishes. It being a Cold War, there was always a side skirmish going on somewhere. And so the research never ended, and it was fascinating because we don't learn a lot of it. Operation Pope from August 1982. No idea. That's a true Stasi operation. Like
That's crazy.
crazy stuff. Yeah.
That's wild. Yeah, because when I read that part, I was like, oh, because everyone was freaking out about it. And it's just like,
Right.
is it worth bringing it up or is it just safer to just sweep it under the rug and
Right.
make sure it does not reach the public knowledge?
Yeah.
That's so
At the
crazy to me.
time, yeah, no, at the time, the Vatican and the president, who was President Reagan at the time, really did believe that it would start World War III. And so, although there was that secret, and I put it in the author notes, that CIA operation where they sussed out exactly what happened, everybody decided to keep it quiet for fear that it would erupt into a world war. So it was
Yeah.
crazy stuff to research.
Yeah. That's so crazy. I'm sorry. I feel a sneeze coming on. It's like,
Oh, that's okay.
I'm like, wait a second. I'm like waiting for it. And then, okay, so I guess it's going to be fine. I was like, I couldn't ignore it. Yeah, that's so crazy to me. I imagine that was so much fun too, just like how many things that you learned that you had
It,
no idea. Because you're right, like there's only certain points of our history or even like international history, like global history that we learn that we're fed in schools. And it's to really, if you look at like those points in history, it's, yeah, like you said, those like little moments that we just don't aren't
yeah,
unless you go start digging yourself like when you're
right.
older or maybe you're doing it for a different purpose, like you have to
Yeah,
dig a little bit deeper. It's that's yeah, that's so wild, like how many little stories or events are out there like that is just not
so
common
many.
knowledge. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so
So
crazy.
one crazy story I tell you about in 1981, where Soviet troops were on the border of Poland, and then they backed off. And I was giving a book talk, and I met a woman, and she said she was from Poland. And I said, "Oh my goodness, I bet you don't know this crazy story." And I told her about the troops because I didn't know where in Poland she lived. And she looked at me and she goes, "I lived on the border and it was terrifying." And I'm like, "Oh, I can't tell you anything." But
Yeah.
I mean, that really brought it to me in a whole new level. I had done the research on it, but to have someone say, not only was I there, it was truly terrifying. We thought they were going to invade. It was horrible. That brought it to life too in a whole new way.
Yeah, just the context and the psyche
Yeah.
and the emotional impact that in that moment, in that time. It's because
Yeah.
even now, however many years later, and she's still, yeah, it was terrifying.
Oh,
She remembers
exactly.
that terror.
Absolutely did. Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah, so wild. I know
So
history is
another woman,
crazy like that.
and this is my last story. Another woman I
That's fine. Tell me all of them.
But another woman I met lived as 2 years as a teenager in West Berlin, and her father was in the US military. And just recently, her father sent her Stasi file. And she said she's having a little PTSD now because she was tracked every minute of those 2 years. Every date she went on, everything she did was in that file. And she said it was really scary and very violating. She had no idea she
Yeah.
had a file. She's a teenager at the time. So really, not only did I thoroughly enjoy the research in the sense that I learned so much and there was so much to bring to the page, but I have met so many people now who have fascinating stories of living through these times and that really made them even more real. And you do, to your point at the very beginning, how these events affect individual lives. They had incredible impact.
That's crazy because I remember one of the things that stood out was just like how sneaky everyone had to be, no matter what. It's
Yeah.
everybody was just paranoid. Everybody was like, "Don't walk with a purpose. Just look casual. Don't look, don't stand out too much." And even then, with Harris's just who he was, his job prospect, his career derailed a little bit, or he was
Mhm.
stopped. It was obstructed because his grandparents or his in-laws had lived on the other side. And I thought that was like there was so much paranoia and so much fear
Yeah.
and so much big brother looming vibe. And I can't imagine like just reading about it, and I'm just like, Jesus Christ. And like I'm thinking like being in that type of life, in that type of environment, that's what your story like reminded me of when I was reading this book, is where like it had to, God, there was like people had to jump through so many hoops just to, and even that, like the teenager who's just like being probably living a normal life,
Yeah. In
but not
West Berlin,
even,
too. Not
yeah,
even East Berlin. Yeah.
no, that's
Yeah.
so crazy. Yeah, it's scary and it's violating, and it's just almost makes you feel a little. I would feel like maybe a little bit oblivious. Feel like, how did I not notice that I was being tracked for 2 years? I don't like your self reflection. What you remember from that time after
Yeah.
the fact.
Yeah. Crazy
That's so
stuff.
wild. Yeah. So let me see here. So I don't know if you usually do this in your books, but so there's you like dual point of view and then like dual
Hmm.
timelines. So you were like switching back and forth, points
Hmm.
of view, switching back and forth between the 60s and the 80s.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to explore that. If you've had to do that before, like how do you approach that, and what, because I imagine it was pretty like challenging trying to get in the headspace and then of a person who even from a different generation from you, different gender from you, different context from you. How did you like
Yeah.
get in the headspace, and then how did you like switch back and forth and make it happen?
So it's great questions. I have done that before, multiple points of view. And I really do like that in that I think it opens up the story in a whole new way. To your point, though, I did not write Harris's individually and feel that I got into his point of view and then wrote Luisa's individually. Because if I did that, then they wouldn't follow one arc. And if you
Sure.
notice, they're going through a lot of the same emotions at the same time, even though they're spanned by 20 years, 30 years, getting closer and closer in time. But they'll go through the same emotions. And I wanted the tension to build simultaneously with each of them. So I did write it in order. And you're right, when I got to Harris's perspective, I had to envision the whole world a little more gray, and I had to get into that headspace of you are being watched every moment. And if you notice, his sentences lengthen. The way I wrote him was he's more almost, in many ways, even though he's a journalist where you think maybe he'd have terse sentences or something, but they're longer, they're more lyrical because his chapters are letting you into his heart. And so it really was a shift in writing, and that actually helped the shift in getting into his head because he's wandering around the city and telling you how he feels, a lot of it,
Yeah.
which I really enjoyed writing his chapters. But they did have to be written together. And it was all leading up to that point at the end where it's the same scene, but it's from her perspective and from his perspective. And that was so much fun. And that was super challenging though, because I had to make sure every word spoken was the same and every objective movement was the same. But I had to make sure I stayed in how Louisa would perceive it and how Harris would perceive it. I had to be really careful on that one. But it was
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because I think I mean, it's a really great like storytelling device where you can like you keep the reader engaged. Because for me, it was okay. Now we're back to Louisa. Okay, now we're back to Harris, and it was yeah. I like how you parallel their emotions and even like their changes. I guess like the changes in their story, in their individual story, because obviously there's a lot at stake for both of them. And I just, Harris is, I mean, I like them both as characters, but I think Harris, like his character growth, like was a little bit more meaningful in my opinion because he started off as like pro state and
Oh yeah.
he's like, oh yes, my country, blah, blah, blah. And now, and eventually through his experiences and through what he sees like his country's become and what it did to his family, and
Mhm.
then he starts to go through those monumental changes, but then he's still like stuck too. He can't like very
Yeah,
openly talk about it because like
absolutely not.
you can't trust anybody. And even if you don't, oh, like I'm not being watched by the authorities, like the authorities are having someone watch someone like all the time.
Right.
So who's to
Yeah.
say it's not you? Who's to say that you can't?
Position.
I just, my heart broke for him because he just, of what he goes through and his losses. And he's just, he's desperate when he starts reaching out to father-in-law and kind of,
Yeah.
that kind of like start you see a shift, right? Like the shift where he's no okay, like something's gonna happen here, and yeah, it's just like I felt bad for him, and it's at the same time he can't look away. I was rooting for him, even though I was like, dude, okay, better late than never.
No,
Wake up,
I
what?
agree. It was hard. It was hard to write those first chapters where he was really fighting his wife and really believed the party line. And then when he wrote that letter, which considering how at odds his ideology was to Walter's, his father-in-law's, in a way, the humility to write that letter to him and say, basically, train me. Like, I want to communicate with you, and I don't even know how. So train me. And I was like, okay, you're going to be okay, Harris. Do not
Yeah,
think you're going to be okay.
yeah, that was like probably the best thing that he could have asked is not just not just for like updates because it's like he misses his daughter, but yeah, like something that's going to help him also maybe just keep up the farce, keep up the facade that he's happy, he loves his country.
Right?
He's not depressed or angry, none of that.
None of that.
Because, yeah, the code breaking, that was such a cool concept. And I want to explore that, like how, because you touched on that, how you looked into kind of like history and research and all that stuff. So, how did that go for you? Were you like developing kind of the system that they would fall on, that they would rely on?
It came from when I discovered the Venona Project, and maybe I'm really late to it. I know other authors have written whole books on it, but I discovered it and I was like, oh my goodness. And it was this incredible code breaking project from 1943 all the way to 1980, primarily run by women. And so when I stumbled across that, I was like, wait a minute. What if when it closed, another CIA officer said, ooh, there's value in those old codes. I'm going to start a Venona too. And so that's what I modeled where Louisa works on. And then once I had a code breaker, I was like, that's a great way to get things past the wall. Because back in the early 60s, there were no sat phones. They were just the technology was so limited to get messages out. Letters and everything was read by sensors, but letters was almost the only way. And so then I was like, that's how Harris is going to do it. And so then it all coupled on each other. When you write letters, you need somebody with the ability to read them. And then of course, unbeknownst to Louisa, her grandfather was training her all along. And that was so fun to write. All those little codes when she was little and those rhymes and those riddles makes her great at her job. But it was in a way training her. So I don't know. It
No,
all
I thought
came
that was
together.
so smart. Yeah,
It
I
was
thought that was really smart. That's really cool, especially since her grandfather was just being sneaky about it. He was just, no, here's a little game, here's a little riddle, and hoping that it would become ingrained. Because, yeah, like, what was a foreshadowing or just her grandpa thinking ahead, like just really thinking ahead, like someday, I don't know, maybe you'll find these, maybe I'll be able to tell you the truth, maybe she'll have the tools that she needs to finish. I don't know, like finish what he started, but just the tools that she needs to get any information that she wants to get, that were that safely anyway. Because
yeah,
it's, yeah, like it's like when we're meeting Louisa, like it's when she's a grown woman, it's still, yeah, like the 80s, like the wall is still up and things are
wall
still
is
very
still up.
scary. Yeah, things
Yeah.
are scary over there. And so for her to just be like, I'm just gonna go. Let go.
There you go.
I'm just gonna I'm just gonna do this. But I imagine like carrying that momentum of her slowly learning the truth, and then the implications and the fact that if something needs to be done, she's gonna go do it. And she certainly does. But I just thought, yeah, it was like, as the reader, we're like leading up to it, we're like, oh, we're like finding out with her. And then she's just, okay, no, I gotta go do this now. We're like, oh, be
You're
careful.
doing
But yeah,
what?
yeah. As the reader, I was like, yes, girl, go. But I was also, ugh, how's she gonna, like, how are you gonna do
Yeah,
this?
I
Like, what,
know. I know.
how could you possibly do it? How could you possibly figure this
But
out
that you see, and that
undetected?
was fun too, from her perspective, and I loved having that first meeting when she gets to West Berlin. From her perspective, the military uniform in a shoebox, she'd heard it worked. And I loved him sitting her down and going, "Do you know why you haven't heard of it recently?" Because that's
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be a whole lot harder than you think.
Yeah,
And the
absolutely. I
fun
know. It's,
part,
but it also adds some stakes, right? Where it's just, okay,
yes,
no, I'm not, she's not just gonna land in a pool of good luck or anything.
right.
She's gonna dip her toes in and then see how it is, and then she's gonna get, unfortunately, a reality check.
That's exactly right. I think
It's,
she thought it'd be easy. She's clever. And he's, I'm out of here. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of because the Stasi will get you before you cross over that line.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I know. It was just so, okay, yeah, because then I'm like, what now? And then it's just, and it's, yeah, it's almost like heartbreaking, but yeah, like I said, ups the stakes and it makes things more engaging. It was like, yeah, I want to know too, Louisa, how the hell are you gonna do this? Well, like, what are you doing? Come on. Like, let me see. You mentioned this before when you were talking about the parts. So, what were like the most challenging parts to write and then the most enjoyable parts to write?
Mm. Okay, so the most challenging parts to write probably, to be honest, it would be those early moments for Louisa as she's waking up to what's really going on in her life and the fact that she's never understood her life. And I think that was challenging because you want to unfold that in an interesting way, but a lot of that action is internal. It's shocking what she found in those few days. At each kind of turning of the clock, or the, as you'd say, the turning of the screw, she learned something new. I think the most engaging or fun part to write was the punk scene. Willow changed clothes, and that is an absolute true thing. An East German punk band could get a license to come over to the West. Now, of course, they had a Stasi escort, but they could get a license to come over to the West and then be taken right back. And in the punk culture, or probably in any underground music culture, they were considered sellouts. But that band, their way of fighting was, hey, but if we get this license and we can go to West Berlin, we get our message out to the world. It might be somewhat diluted because we had to tone it down to get that license, but we can get out to the world. And because that was true and that kind of thing happened, it was a great way to get Louisa over the wall. And I loved getting her ear pierced while she was standing there. And it was really fun. And it showed the risk she was willing to take. Once she did that, she was all in, all vulnerable, instinct only. And so it was really taking a woman who had things planned and in control and just saying, all right, fly. There you go do it. And she does really fun.
It was like, I like the phrase, kick that fledgling off the nest.
Yeah.
Time to go. Spread your
Yeah.
wings with
Yeah.
Godspeed. Yeah, I loved that. I loved, and yeah, because I remember that part in the story where, yeah, they were criticized for doing that, but then that was the way that they had an in, that they can have an opportunity
Right.
to participate in rebellion, things like that, like sneak
Yeah.
people in, sneak people out. Like, I thought that was so fascinating because it's, yeah, obviously, and even then, I forget the other bandmate's name, the guy that he was like really intimidating because he's like bigger and stuff.
Oh,
But being, huh?
Panzer, named after a Russian tank. Yeah.
Right there.
Like,
Yeah, it was just like it was easy to judge there based on the appearance, but he was like
yeah.
almost like was protective over her and he was very real. He no nonsense. He's listen, this is what's gonna happen, this is what we gotta do. And
Yeah.
like how you said, like once she's over, like she's there and she's committed, like she can't there's no going back.
Yeah.
There's no half-ass plan. It's you're in. Like you
You're in. You're all in.
go
This is
back.
your life and Panzer's life and all their lives, and you're in.
Yeah, and it's so remarkable, obviously, because it's a fictional story, but like it's so remarkable, like to the possibility of one person just having to do that. And I like it's just for the whole family, because I also want to explore that kind of topic too, because loyalty to country versus loyalty to family is one of the bigger picture conversations that this book, confronts you with. Because I would like to believe, that I would be loyal to my family. But then
Mhm.
also, I mean, I was never like, I wouldn't call myself, I don't know, super patriotic or anything like that. But I would like to believe like that, yeah, I would be super faithful to my family, loyal to my family but like I could see for someone who, even if you just worked for the government, like, or a government contractor job, like at what point do you draw the line, right? Like at what point? And even then it's okay. It's dangerous to walk back, right? It's dangerous to leave that environment and to decide, you know what, I don't agree with this. I'm not going to work here anymore. Like, it's dangerous to do that because then you're raising suspicions and people are, well, what are you going to do now? Like, what are you going to do with the information that you do have now? What are you going to, it's so crazy. So I'm like thinking, okay, if I was in Harris's, I would like to think that I would do the right thing, but you never know because he got a rude awakening about it. But yeah,
Yeah.
I wanted to explore that because I really did like what you did that there. What that was, he was just forced to confront it and make a choice. And it was because of his love for his daughter that
Yeah.
and his family. And he saw and he was like, this is what this life is like now because of what they're doing to people.
And I think in a lot of situations, and I don't know if you've encountered one or even if I've encountered one, but there could be a point where all of us in different contexts reach a line. and say, No, I will not cross that line." And that's basically what happened to Harris. He desperately wanted to help his wife, and that was that. Like, how hard it was to protect the woman he loved most and ultimately couldn't, and then being trapped by that. And so basically, I hemmed him in again, again, pushing him to that point where, okay, where are you going to choose what is important to you? And when are you going to, as much as you can, because we're all subjective, we all have perspective, but when are you going to open up the sort of blinders and see a little more clearly what your wife saw, or
Yeah.
what you deep down might know to be true? A bit more objectivity to it. And yeah, his journey, I agree with you. His journey to me is far more poignant in many ways than Luisa's. It's a lifetime change. Whereas she has a super fast paced,
Oh
fascinating
yeah.
internal, external 1 week adventure. Like, she gets hit from all sides. It's fascinating.
Yeah,
It's
and
neat.
she doesn't even have time to reflect on herself
No.
or memories that she can afford to reflect on. It's only because she's trying to see if there's something there to help her. And so, yeah, she doesn't have time. She's got to be secret and sneaky, and she's got to be efficient. But yeah, she doesn't even have time to sit back and be like, okay, what's
Gee,
going
what does
on
this mean
here?
for
Or
me?
like just using her experiences from her career too. Just a lot of either her skills that she's got or the tools at her disposal. So she's just yeah, she's very condensed growth,
Very.
like for
Fast
sure.
growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see here. I want to. So there's like intergenerational relationships here, familial relationships, and then there's the relationship that they had while they were still in Germany, and then like just
Mhm.
amongst her grandparents, and then her aunt, and then there's like kind of the relationship that they have, even though she was super young when that happened, that shift, because there's relationships as they're getting used to their new home, as they're living in America, where they don't have to be so scared or paranoid or worried. So I want to explore that a little bit, like how you navigated those types of relationships and the geographical location and the generational like differences, like how that kind of played into the story of that whole family.
It played a ton. And what I really wanted to focus on is we are absolutely a product of our time and our place and our experiences. Because to your point, Oma, the grandmother, and Opa came to the United States full adults. They were grandparents at that time, came with Louisa. And yet, although they wanted to leave that fear behind, because you're right, they didn't need to fear so much in the US, they couldn't because they didn't understand this new culture. They had grown up and their basis was their old culture. And so it was really interesting to bring that out when Oma was trying to, and I'm not giving too much away here, burn the scrapbook, and she was terrified. And Louisa couldn't understand, why are you so scared? Because if you think about it, coming to the United States at 4, Louisa doesn't remember anything else. She has grown up in a place where you can pretty much say what you want and do what you want. And there's so many freedoms that Oma just can't even fathom. And so you're right, that affects generationally. And so it was interesting to play with that because our default position is to believe that somebody thinks like we do. You and I think alike. Well, no, we don't at all. Your experiences are totally, they're different than mine. But yet, that's our default position. And that absolutely is Luisa's default position until she realizes, no, at a deep fundamental level, my grandmother doesn't see things like I do at all, nor does my Aunt Alice. So it was fascinating to play with that. And
Uh,
it was fascinating also to play with Aunt Alice's backstory that Oma didn't know and what that did to her life, how that boxed her in. So you're right, there are so many layers here.
yeah, yeah. I'm remembering that about Alice too, as she, because of inadvertently or not, however she played whatever role she had in that big picture, she still does harbor some of that guilt into
Absolutely.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
and
she was
I can't
17.
imagine, yeah, like living with that. And
Yeah. She
then,
thought she was doing the right thing, and wow. Yeah, I can't imagine. And then to not be able to be honest about it, to share it. Like,
eating
I
away at her.
and listeners, I'm sorry we're being so cryptic, but I don't mean it
I know,
that way.
right?
Woo.
But hey, more ways to get them to read the book. Like, what the heck are they
Yeah,
talking about?
exactly.
Yeah, that's one thing is because we kind of, the readers, when we're introduced to Alice, we're like, oh, it's her aunt. And then we understand later, like, why she is the way that she is and why she's, you know, had have like a weird, almost detached approach to her niece.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's heartbreaking for really readers, and the way that when Louisa eventually discovers like the why and the how of it, and
Right.
it's sad. It's sad because you like I feel
Yeah.
it's like that's another thing. Like, what if I was if I were in Alice's shoes, like that would be eating away at me for that whole
Oh my
20
goodness.
20 years. Yeah,
Absolutely, it would. And that's my point about how the past affects us whether we know it or not. From Louisa's perspective, just as you said, Aunt Alice was just cold and detached. She has no understanding. But that definitely affects her and her childhood with her aunt, whom she really wanted to know, but who never seemed to want to know her. Yeah, it's fascinating. My hope is, and they have a warm, loving relationship post this book. I
yeah, right.
think they will.
Well, I mean, it is. If it's in your brain, you're the author. So
Right.
what you say
Exactly.
goes. Like,
What I say, they have a great relationship.
so just a few more questions before we wrap up here. Okay. So, what do you hope readers get out of this book, The Berlin Letters?
Okay, so first of all, I hope they have a fun time. It is a race of a book, and yes, there's a lot of serious issues as we've talked about here. There is a totalitarian Soviet East German regime. There's a lot going on, but it's a fun book too. It's a race of books. So I hope they have a great time. But I also hope they think about, and because I definitely did writing it, think about perspective and understanding people better and just those nuances in human nature that I think we're able to explore in fiction even better than we can through a textbook. I think there's so much truth in this book in terms of historical events, but I think there's also truth in this book in the way we humans relate to each other. And I hope they walk away with a really immersive, wonderful experience that lingers in those ideas of understanding and forgiveness and all that from a really great spy story. There you go.
Yeah, that's it. It's not too much to ask. I read, the more I enjoy it. Because yeah, it's an engaging and entertaining way to learn about a different piece of history, and from
Yeah.
someone's point of view, even if it's not American point of view, you can be reading it from any other country's point of view. And I think I just find it so fascinating. As also because so much literature is tied to historical events. Like a lot of
Mhm.
literature is plays on the social commentary of. But yeah, like you said, in what I was saying earlier, it's her choices, and even Harris's too, to an extent, like allowed me to look and be like, okay, like how would I feel, like how would I handle
Mhm.
that, or to help empathize with that, because I don't luckily I don't know what it's like to live in that
Yeah.
sort of country under that rule. I don't know how scary things are, how much work has to you go into just not being on anybody's radar. And so I don't know what it's like to live like that. And so throw that on top of not having your family, not having your team there with you to have your
Right.
back or to help support you. And
Yeah.
then on top of that, was it worth it for him? No.
Mhm.
He was loyal to his job, and in the end, it didn't help him. It was things like that are just like pretty thought provoking. And then you throw in a little, yeah, you gotta up the stakes for Louisa, because if I don't know how you're gonna pull this off, let's, I'm gonna just watch you figure it out. Because I would have
Exactly.
no idea. I wouldn't know where to begin. I'm just like, no, like it's like she's lucky she's at least spoke some of the language, right? Like
I know. I know. Exactly.
I can't, yeah, like an American, born, or well, she's like she became a citizen eventually, but yeah, she was like a
Yeah.
foreign born US resident, and she's got to go back and figure things out and figuring out like what can be done, and that gets messages her go on be like, oh crap, like my German is rusty, like what. It's like, great, yeah, you should have, that was the first thing you should have thought about, like, can you speak to people.
Exactly. How are you gonna
No. So what advice do you have for Louisa? What advice do you have for Hera?
Let's see, advice for Louisa post the story or in it? Which
Yeah, so I would say probably towards the end, because when I ask authors this, they say if they followed my advice at the beginning, there would be no book. So what if,
well,
so
the
yeah,
funny
I would
thing
say
is,
as we're finishing the book, what
yeah,
advice would you give to them?
I was gonna say, because if it was at the beginning, I actually my advice to Louisa when I was creating her character was every moment you go. That when she was my go girl. Every minute, what is the go button? And so she followed my advice there.
There you
After,
go.
though, I will tell you, after the book, I'm gonna tell her, okay, slow down a little, look around, enjoy life. She definitely, at the end of the book, she is pursuing CIA still at a high level. But I'm going to be like, pay attention to your family, slow down a little, look around. Because
Yeah.
I think at the end of the book, she has, as you were just talking about Harris being alone, she has a network of family who absolutely loves her. And a lot of the secrets have come out. And so I'm hoping she does take that moment and really love that family now as it surrounds her. Almost garden is growing, Alice is there, her father's doing interesting things. So that would be my advice for Louisa. My advice for Harris might be the same. He's heading back to Germany in the epilogue of the book, and I think he's going to do great things, but it would be take everything you've learned and always strive for the compassionate thing, the one that makes human lives better. So there you go. Because he's got some interesting work ahead of him. So
Yeah, I would say so. After all that risk, then he comes out, yeah, without be more cryptic once again. I think he comes out not, a little bit of winning. I wouldn't say he's a
yeah,
total winner. A little bit
a little bit.
there.
I
Yeah, yeah. It's like I'm not saying it's not like he's won the lottery or anything, but I
no,
think he's on the
no,
right track.
but he's
He's a,
slowly building life. Yeah,
mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And poor guy, he deserves it. He deserves it for
he
sure.
does.
Okay, so Catherine. Oh no, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I love, and this really doesn't give anything away. I loved that because Walter put all of that money aside because the CIA pays its spies, that he paid off what Louisa took from Oma. I just love that family twist to that. It made me feel really good. That is a topic, but I liked that. I liked that moment.
Yeah, because you know what, it tore her to do that, but
Yeah. Oh, and it should
without
have.
it,
Should have.
yeah, it absolutely. But it's what was she, like I said, she was using everything that she had available to her. She had no
Yeah.
choice but to use what she had in her arsenal, either in her network, her connections,
Yeah.
or just in her brain,
I I totally
trusting her
agree.
gut. Yeah, 100%. Catherine Ray, are you working on anything, or what's next for you that you could talk about?
Oh, okay. So about 3 hours ago, I handed in my next manuscript. So I'm
There
like
we go.
I need food, I need sleep. But yeah, I'm super excited about it. It is scheduled to publish June 10th of 2025.
Oh,
It's just 3 hours ago, went off to my editor, and it is an art forgery caper. So it was a lot of fun to write. Little something different than Cold War Spies, art
yeah.
forgery caper. I had a lot of fun with it.
That sounds interesting. I bet that's like a
It
whole
is
nother rabbit hole that you fell into while
a whole
digging
nother rabbit
in.
hole.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's so cool. Is that also like on the historical fiction side of
It
it?
is. It is.
Yeah.
It takes place
Cool.
in 1973 London.
Oh, got it. Oh,
Yeah.
cool. Oh, that sounds, yeah, that'll be, I can imagine you had a lot of fun with that too.
I I had
Just
so much fun with that. Yeah, it really did.
That's awesome. Okay, Katherine Reay, the Berlin Letters. That book is available now. Thank you so much for chatting, for taking the time. Like I said, I really enjoyed this one. I recommend it to people who enjoy historical fiction, and that's not wholly based on World War II, but it's in there. It's part of the story. It's part of the historical relevance. But yeah, a Cold War novel and spy and a young woman who just has to take matters into her own hands against, yeah, the whole family, country, figuring out, and really thought provoking. So I do recommend it. I really enjoyed this one. And if you ever, I'll keep an eye out for your name so that when you've got your next work coming out, feel free to come back. Be happy to chat again.
And there you go. That was Katherine Reay talking about the Berlin Letters. That book is available now. Apologize for the weird audio mix up and just I know I sound a little weird, but I'm at the mercy of my technology. And unfortunately, I did not know about it until it came to editing. But if you made it this far throughout the whole episode, I really appreciate it. And but either way, rate, review, subscribe. You could check out the show notes where you can find Katherine online and on social media, where you can buy the book. But while you are browsing around on social media trying to find your authors, make sure you find Cantina Book Club. Give me a follow. Check out my book reviews on cantinabookclub.com. If you need book recommendations, you can always reach out to me directly or just check out my website. And if you are reading a book that you really enjoy and that you want to tell everyone about it, recommend it, please do. And one of the best ways to do that is to go ahead and rate and review them on Goodreads or on Amazon if you can. It really does help the authors out with them getting more work and sharing more stories. But either way, and as always, thank you guys so much for listening.